Good evening, everybody. Our students who should sign in if you haven't done so on the tables in the back. To all staff members who've helped very tirelessly with this event. Faculty, community members, partners. Welcome to the Vries-VanderKooy Memorial Lecture. My name is Annemarie Toebos. I am the Director of Dutch Studies in the Department of Germanic Languages and Literatures. And tonight we gather for a very special De Vries-VanderKooy. It's the 25th De Vries-VanderKooy Memorial Lecture, so this is an anniversary for this series. And so inside a kind of a beautiful alignment, tonight's anniversary is also a celebration of the 50th anniversary of Suriname's independence. So we have a 25th and a 50th anniversary here tonight. So there's several people who are going to speak, but I'm going to take you through the parts of this celebration tonight. We start with a Carillon Prelude, a concert that's in the Baird Tower here, in Burton Tower, in the Baird Carillon. So we have opened the windows just a little bit so we can hear it. It can still sometimes be a little soft, the sound of it. So I ask everybody to be quiet as we listen to this concert. Okay, so after that happens, we have a presentation of our De Vries-VanderKooy commemorative plaque that will be presented to our lecturer tonight. And then, of course, what we're all here for is the lecture itself. And then after about a 10-minute question and answer session, we have a celebratory reception. So those are the parts of tonight. And then welcome everybody that is here, and I give the floor now to my colleague, the chair of the Department of Germanic Languages and Literatures, Dr. Kerstin Barnd. Thank you.
Thank you, Annemarie, and welcome to you all. It is my pleasure to introduce to you Arthur Verhoogt, who is our Associate Dean for Humanities in the College of Literature, Science, and the Arts, which we refer to as LSNA. And he's also Arthur F. Thornell Professor and Professor of Papyrology and Greek in the Department of Classical Studies at the University of Michigan. Dr. Verhoogt received his PhD in Classics from the University of Leiden in the Netherlands. And this is not the moment to rehearse all of his CV, but I wanted to mention that his most recent book, Discarded, Discovered, Collected, the University of Michigan Papyrus Collection, received the 2018 Press Book Award from the University of Michigan Press. While his research, publication, teaching, and his exhibition projects have focused on the archaeologies of writing in ancient Egypt in particular, and the social, economic, and cultural history of Hellenistic and Roman Egypt more broadly, Arthur has also been an active member of the Dutch Studies community here on campus. Moreover, he has been a champion and supporter of critical, collaborative, and transnational humanities inquiry in LSNA and at the School of Rackham, our graduate school, when he was Associate Dean for Special Projects and the Humanities there. And also, so through Rackham, also across campus. So please welcome Dr. Verhoogt.
Thank you, Kerstin, for this kind introduction, and it's so nice to hear my last name pronounced correctly. Thank you. That's somewhat difficult to do in this university, apparently. I want to add my welcome to Annemarie's and Kerstin's welcome to everybody here, and especially to Dr. Venetiaan, the speaker of today. The first thing I will do is briefly talk about what you're going to hear, so about the Carillon Prelude. This carillon prelude was put together by Dr. Eng, and to honor Dr. Venetiaan as the speaker and also celebrate the 50th anniversary of the independence of the Republic of Suriname. So the pieces that you find on your program, Birth of a New Age, Mariata den Kushina, Bengwan Solo, and Ode to Cape Town, first appeared in 2022 during a history-making carillon concert, Your Rhythm is Your Rebellion, which was a collaboration between Dutch Studies, a carillon program, the African Studies Center, and the Center for World Performance Studies. Now, as many of you may know, the carillon is an instrument of instrumental prestige and power that dominates landscapes both visually and sonically. It's also a Dutch instrument. Dutch carillons and other types of Dutch bell towers stand also in many of the lands that the Dutch colonized. And historical carillons in the Netherlands that are still played today were built during a time of prosperity fueled by colonial extraction. This makes it the repurposing of the carillon to amplify the music of Suriname, Curaçao, Bonaire, Indonesia, and South Africa, as we are doing today, particularly meaningful. The two performers are Dr. Tiffany Eng, who is Associate Professor of Music in School of Music, Theatre and Dance, and also the University carillonist, so she's very often on top of that tower. She is an energetic advocate of diversity in contemporary music, and she, through her composer collaborations, has significantly increased the American repertoire for carillon pieces. One of her students, Mr. Adam Leonard, and then with composers you always have to say when they were born 2002, is a Master of Music student in carillon performance in the School of Music, Theatre and Dance, who already has composed and arranged over 60 works for the instrument, including classical compositions, sacred music, blues, soul, gospel, jazz, and folk melodies. And the first piece that we will hear live today is one of his arrangements. Now, I need to alert you to one change in the printed program. Given that not many of you will have been up in the carillon tower to see what actually happens during a carillon performance, we will begin by showing a video clip of Dr. Eng playing Kendall Williams's Ode to Cape Town, so that you can see the normally invisible carillonist playing the keyboard and pedalboard. As a result, she will skip this piece on the live performance and go straight from the anthem of Bonaire to Mirozu. Please also note that the final piece that Dr. Eng will play is the national anthem of the Republic of Suriname. At that point, Dr. Eng will give us an instrumental cue, ding dong dong, something like that, watch me. And then I will ask you to stand in body or in spirit at that moment to honor the Republic of Suriname. After the recital has completed, there will be a brief intermission that will allow Dr. Eng and Mr. Leonard to safely come down from the tower and come in here. During that time, we will show you another video of Dr. Eng playing one of the pieces you've heard live. But with that, I think we're ready for the first piece on the video. wait for Dr. Eng and Mr. What's his name? I forgot my notes. Adam to come down. We can watch more of the video, and that will take about, well, let's hope that they will do it safely. Okay. Transition. Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you, Adam. This was a great performance. We are now moving to the second part of tonight's event, the Vries-VanderKooy Memorial Lecture, the 25th installment. This lecture was established in 1996 as part of an effort to draw more attention to things Dutch at the University of Michigan. The lecture was named after two influential former members of the Netherlands American University League, or NAL, as we often refer to it, Jan de Vries and Meindert van der Kooy. Professor Jan de Vries was a Dutch physician with the World Health Organization before joining the University of Michigan faculty in the School of Public Health, teaching in the International Health Program from 1974 to 1984. Vries-VanderKooy, member of the Dutch resistance during the Second World War, worked as assistant director of plant operations, and one of the things he's also known for is planting many tulips on the University of Michigan campus. Since 1996, there has been a long line of interesting speakers. Since arriving at the University of Michigan in 2001, I have attended my fair share of these talks, and they were always a great opportunity to connect and to see people, as is happening tonight as well. Although between us, I have to note that I like the 6 p.m. beginning better than the 8 p.m. beginning. That was more traditional, I think. I'm getting older, so. Tonight's lecture is made possible in part by the generous support of the Netherlands-America Foundation and the said Netherlands-American University League, or NAL. It's now my pleasure to introduce Denise Gravenstein, who will introduce the main speaker of the event. Denise was hired in the winter semester of 2024 to help develop the first Surinamese Dutch language curriculum and Suriname studies program in US Dutch studies. May I repeat this? The first Surinamese Dutch language curriculum and Surinamese studies at any US institution. So we're here, people. Denise is a sociologist and a native speaker of Surinamese Dutch and Sranantongo, the lingua franca of Suriname. For those of you in the audience who are still looking for a Dutch class to take in the upcoming winter semester, with the generous support of the Vice Provost for Engaged Learning, Denise will bring a first group of University of Michigan students to Suriname this spring as part of her course Beyond Dutch, a study abroad course in Suriname. Again, the class roster will be up in about a couple of weeks. Go for it, sign up, and definitely go with it. Please welcome Denise to the podium.
Always have to test the mic. Can everyone hear me? Okay. Good evening, everyone. It is my great pleasure and honor to stand before you and introduce a distinguished member of Suriname, Dr. Shanti Venetiaan. I want to thank all of you, students, faculty, friends, and also partners here and in Suriname, for making this program and this celebration possible. On this special night, we do more than uphold an academic tradition. We mark a historic milestone, 50 years of Surinamese independence, Years Srefidensi, as we say in Sranantongo. This year, on November 25th, Suriname commemorates half a century as a free and sovereign nation. We gather this evening to reflect on what that means for Suriname and for our global community, including our own institution, Germanic languages and literatures, and our Dutch studies program. For me, this moment is deeply personal. I was born after Suriname's independence, and my sister was born just before, in September 1975. At the time of independence, my mother was given a choice: move to the Netherlands and become Dutch, or stay and be a Surinamer, claiming our freedom. My mother chose Suriname. Our family's history mirrors that of countless Surinamese stepping from a colonial past into the uncertain but hopeful territory of self-determination. Growing up, Srefidensi meant the power to imagine our own future, to celebrate our diversity, and to build a country rooted in respect and belonging. Famous Surinamese author Cynthia McLeod puts it best: "We hebben geen dominante groep. We are a country without a majority population. We are all minorities, and we have learned to accept and respect each other, regardless of how we came together here. Hoe wij hier ook samenkwamen," as beautifully echoed in our national anthem, played by University Carolinist Dr. Tiffany Ng a few moments ago. Now standing here as a Surinamese immigrant in the United States, I am deeply aware of what it means to come from a place where independence is not just a date in history, but an ongoing commitment in spite of and beyond the legacies of colonialism. I bring this understanding into my work here at the University of Michigan, where we have launched the first Surinamese Dutch curriculum in the United States. The curriculum is part of a new minor in the Dutch language and culture, founded on decolonial principles and reimagining a Dutch studies that centers the perspectives and histories of the Dutch colonialized world. This brings us to tonight's the Vries-VanderKooy Memorial Lecture and our distinguished lecturer. Dr. Shanti Venetiaan was born in Suriname under Dutch colonial rule. After secondary school, she went to study mathematics in the Netherlands. But unlike most of her peers, she returned to Suriname after obtaining a PhD from the University of Amsterdam. Now, as president of board at the Anton de Kom University, the nation's leading academic institution, Dr. Venetiaan made history as the first woman to chair the board and as a founding dean for the Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Sciences. She remains Suriname's only PhD mathematician, having earned her doctorate with a dissertation on bootstrap bounds. And over the past 25 years as a professor, a mentor, a builder of programs, and a dedicated advocate for science and education, she has shaped Suriname's academic future. Dr. Venetiaan is also the daughter of Dr. Ronald Venetiaan, Suriname's 3-time president who guided our nation through pivotal years of change and stability, serving from 1991 to 1996, and again from 2000 to 2010. The Venetiaan family represents the highest ideals of public service, education, and national pride. In her lecture, Dr. Venetiaan will reflect on the upbringing of passionate advocacy for independence, with love for country, responsibility, and the conviction that Surinamese people must take their future into their own hands, with or without help from the Netherlands or wealthier countries. She reminds us that while taking ownership, Surinamese progress remains a work in progress for many. Her father's lesson on perseverance, transformation, challenging circumstances into hopeful ones with unity remain as relevant as ever. In Dr. Venetiaan's own words, "I am proud we have reached this milestone. In Suriname, we have the saying, mi kanto, ma mi dete. I have been knocked down, but I'm still here. Suriname is not yet where we want it to be, but our country is here to stay, moving forward slowly but surely, guided by hope, pride, and deep love for our nation." For Dr. Venetiaan, independence inspires a commitment to strengthening the university, laying a stronger foundation, maintaining high standards, ensuring accessibility for all, and addressing Suriname's greatest challenge, closing the gap between rich and poor so everyone can benefit from the country's wealth. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Venetiaan to our stage, academic leader, champion for Surinamese education, and proud daughter of Suriname. Dr. Venetiaan. Dear Dr. Venetiaan, on behalf of the University of Michigan, the Department of Germanic Languages and Literatures, and the Dutch program, I am proud to present you with our commemorative Vries-VanderKooy Memorial Plaque. One second as we transition.
De top presentation mode van. So, Denise, thank you very much for this beautiful introduction. I don't know for sure if it's a Dutch or it's a Surinamese saying. Mijn hoofd gaat groot worden. My head is going to be very, very big. Good evening, all present. A special greeting to the Chair of Germanic Languages and Literature, Kirsten Barnd, Annemarie Toebosch, Director of Dutch Studies, en Arthur Verhoogd. Ik hoop dat ik uw naam ook goed uitspreek. Associate Dean of Humanities. First of all, I'd like to thank the department to invite me to present the 2025 annual the Vries-VanderKooy lecture. Special thank you to Annemarie Toebosch and Denise Gravenstein, who explained to me what this lecture was about. I find it very interesting that the department takes an interest in 50 years of independence of Suriname, which we'll have on the 25th of November. Today, I'll give you an idea of what Suriname is, how Suriname came to be, and what lies ahead. I'll give you some insight in our university, the Anton de Kom University of Suriname, which is some years older, namely 57 years, but is a consequence of the urge for breaking free from the metropole, the Netherlands. And I have to put in a disclaimer. This presentation doesn't necessarily reflect the vision, the views of the Anton de Kom University. They are personal. And furthermore, I will present events which may be rather colored and not totally objective. Denise mentioned it already. In 1975, when Suriname became independent from the Netherlands, I was 8 years old, and my father was Minister of Education and Population Development. And he was a big advocate of independence. And it was his party which was in power in 1975. And they pushed this through. They didn't want to postpone any longer. So I'm totally biased. And also there are some events and details which I skipped because otherwise the lecture would be too long. So let me first explain what Srefidensi means. It's the word in our language Sranantongo, and it means self-dependence. Srefi means self. And Densi doesn't really have a meaning. I'd say that the Dutch word zelfstandigheid describes better. Zelfstandigheid means standing on your own. Might be a better word than onafhankelijkheid, which is a literal translation from independence. So the inventor of the word Srefidensi is one of Suriname's most important poets, Trefosa. He wrote the lyrics of our national anthem. Yeah. So where is Suriname located? On the map you see that Suriname is in the northern part of South America. The area is about 160,000 square kilometers, which is about 63,000 square miles. And the population is about 640,000 people. We had a census this year, and I expect it will be shown that our population has grown, but this number is not, the results are not in yet. The area which Suriname is a part of is known as the Guyana Shield. It stretches from Venezuela in the west to Amapá in the east in Brazil, and from the Atlantic Ocean in the north to Roraima southwards, also in Brazil. In the 17th century, Suriname was also called Dutch Guyana. Guyana, our neighbor to the west, was called British Guyana. And up till now, we have in the east French Guyana, which the French themselves call Guyane, as that part is just seen as an overseas territory of France. Suriname is part of South America, but culturally has more characteristics of a Caribbean country. As such, Suriname is a member of the Organization of American States, OAS, and the Caribbean Community, CARICOM, but also a member of the Union of South American Nations, UNASUR. Of course, the first inhabitants of Suriname were the indigenous people. The main tribes or peoples at that time were the Arawak, which are nowadays called Lokono in Suriname, the Carib, which are called Kalinya, and the Trio and the Wayana. The first Europeans came to Suriname in the last years of the 15th century, and Suriname fell into the hands of different European conquerors. For instance, in 1630, a group of Englishmen led by Captain Marshall settled in Suriname, and they presumably came from the island of Barbados. In 1650, the Englishman Francis Willoughby, governor of Barbados, founded the colony of Suriname. He came to Suriname as a consequence of the conflict between Oliver Cromwell and the Royalists in England. Willoughby, who had chosen the side of the Royalists, was fired as governor from Barbados, and when the war ended, he was rewarded for his loyalty and obtained a piece of the coast of the Guyanas. So the colony Willoughby Land was founded. But in 1667, Abraham Creinsen sailed to Suriname and obtained the country out of the hands of the family Willoughby. He obtained the fort in Paramaribo, or capital, and named it Fort Zeelandia, and this is the name the fort has to this day. And from this date on, with just a short period of 12 years of English intermediate administration, Suriname was a Dutch colony. The indigenous tribes had taken up arms against the intruders, trying to protect their grounds and also against the enslavement of their people. They frequently attacked plantations. This war ended with the peace treaty in 1686. The first enslaved Africans were brought from the island of Barbados. In the 17th century, we also had an influx from Brazil, from Jewish plantation owners who had to flee from Brazil because of the Inquisition. The part of Brazil where they came from went from Dutch rule to Portuguese rule. So these people came with their slaves to Suriname. And furthermore, Africans were brought to Suriname until the abolishment of the slave trade. So Suriname was a mixture of indigenous people, Europeans, and Africans. Within a few years after arriving in Suriname, groups of enslaved Africans fled from the plantations and settled in the middle part of the country. They made sure to escape far enough so it was not easy to track them. These so-called Maroons must have had help from the indigenous people. These Africans grouped themselves into tribes, of which the most important are the Njuka, also known as Aukaners, the Samaka, Matawai, the Pamaka, the Aluku, and the Quinti. They attacked plantations, and the Dutch brought in soldiers from Holland and also mercenaries to fight against them. They also recruited enslaved Africans to fight against the Maroons. In order to stop the fighting, peace treaties were signed with the Maroons, with the Juka in 1760, and with the Samaka in 1762, and so on. The reason I mention the different groups in the Surinamese society is to let you understand the dynamics of our society. In 1834, England abolished slavery. In 1848, France. So Holland couldn't stay behind and knew that at some point slavery would have to be abolished also in Suriname. On the 1st of July of 1863, slavery was abolished in all the colonies of the Netherlands, so also in Suriname. But the government established a state supervision of 10 years. This meant that the people who just got their freedom were obliged to still work on the plantations for 10 years, this time with a small salary. And it was expected that the formerly enslaved would not stay to work on the plantations after this period of 10 years. So that's why new workers were brought to the colony. There have been several experiments. I mentioned Dutch farmers who came in 1845, Chinese workers who came in 1853, exactly 10 years before the abolishment of slavery. In the English colonies, the influx of British Indian people, and that are people from India, at that time they had a British nationality, coming in as indentured laborers was seen as a success. And as such, the Dutch adopted this idea for Suriname. They got permission to bring people from India to work as indentured laborers. And 10 years after 1863, the first British Indians came to Suriname. The English were not satisfied with the treatment of these indentured laborers who had a British nationality, and the immigration stopped for a while. And as a consequence, the Dutch started with bringing indentured laborers from the island of Java in Indonesia. And this was from 1890 on. After some facilities were put in place, the migration from India to Suriname continued. and it lasted until 1917, when there were big protests led by Gandhi in India to stop the system of indentured labor. And with regards to Indonesia, the last boat arrived in 1930. In the 20th century, Suriname has also seen people arriving from Lebanon and Madeira. Not many, but as in most Caribbean states, these people were mostly visible in textile shops. And even though Suriname is a developing country and not rich, in the last decades, people from Guyana, Haiti, Brazil, and now even from Cuba have come to our country to find a better standard of living or to use Suriname as a hub to other countries. Keep in mind that France is our neighbor, so they just try to cross the river. The river is many kilometers long, and the supervision of the river is not very well. So people cross the river to get to French Guyana. So in terms of ethnicity, Suriname was and still is a melting pot of people coming from different sides of the world. The first elections in Suriname were held in 1866 to get representatives in the koloniale staten, the colonial states. This institution had 13 members, of which 9 were chosen and 4 were appointed by the governor. At that time, Suriname had the census kiesrecht, census suffrage, which means that only people who paid a certain amount of taxes had the right to vote. The census suffrage was in effect until 1936, when the capacity suffrage was introduced. Only men with a diploma of minimal ULO were allowed to take part in the election, and ULO can be compared with the first half of high school or middle school. The number of members was then 15, of which 10 were chosen and 5 appointed. And the name of the representation body was changed to Staten van Suriname. In 1948, the universal suffrage was introduced. Every woman, every man of a minimal age of 23 who was registered to vote was allowed to vote. But it took till 1963 for the people in the hinterland, in the interior, read Maroons and Indigenous, to be able to register to vote. I now get to the establishment of political parties. As one of my references, Setny stated, ethnic relationship has always been the strongest political binder in Suriname. There was some bounding along the lines of religion, but that was gradually overtaken by ethnicity. Long before the formation of political parties began, people were grouped along the lines of ethnicity, religion, and culture, mostly because they were living in more or less isolated groups. Paramaribo, the capital, was predominantly inhabited by what we call Creoles. In other countries, Creoles has another meaning. In Suriname, Creoles means blacks or mixed people. Also in Paramaribo, the white people were living, and in general, people with a certain education level. In the rural areas, you had in our districts conglomerates of British Indians and Javanese people. And they lived in their own bubbles, so to speak. In the hinterland, the Indigenous and Maroons were settled, so the formation by ethnic lines was more or less natural. And as politics is all about interests and how these are perceived, especially the Indian parties, the Hindustani parties, as we call them, were very much in favor of establishing the universal suffrage. Up till the first decades of the 20th century, they were in a marginalized position because their members were not yet so well educated, westernized educated, and so didn't have voting power. So the lobby for universal suffrage was successful in 1948, and in the following elections, everyone registered, as I already said, and of a certain age was allowed to vote. And so we see the following sequence of starting of political parties. May 1946, the Muslim Party. August 1946, the Progressive Surinamese People's Party, were mostly Catholics. September 1946, National Party Suriname. February 1947, Surinamese Hindustani Party. February 1947, Hindustani Javanese Political Party, led by Jagannath Lakshman. April 1947, the Javanese Party named Pergerakan Bangsa Indonesia, Suriname. The Muslim Party, the Surinamese Hindustani Party, and the Hindustani Javanese Political Party merged into the United Hindustani Party. In Dutch, Verenigde Hindustaanse Partij, VHP. The name of the party was changed in 1973 to United Reformed Party, but they kept the same initials, Verenigde Hervormde Partij, VHP. In November 1948, the Javanese, which first had joined the Muslim Party and the Hindustani Javanese Political Party, founded their own party named Kaum Tani Persatuan Indonesia, KTPI, and later, similarly to the VHP, this party changed its name to Kerukunan Tulodo Pranatang Inggil, which means Party for National Unity and Solidarity. So by 1949, when the first election with universal suffrage would be held, the pillarization was complete. NPS for the Creoles, PSV for the Catholics, VHP for the British Indians, for the Hindustani as we call them, and the KTPI for the Javanese. I don't have the results of the election of 1949, but a year later, the census reported the following ethnic mix. So you can see for yourself. So, in other words, Suriname was ethnically divided and is to this day. That does not mean that we face ethnic tension in the same fashion as other countries with a multi-ethnic population. Up till now, Denise already said it, no single group has absolute majority. I here have the numbers of the census of 2012, and so you get a view of what the situation is was then. And as I said, this year we have a census, and I don't think the percentages will change very much. Maybe the Maroons will be a bit more. Yeah, so you have to make coalitions, and you can't have a parliament filled with members of only one ethnicity. This is different from our neighbors, Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago, where there are only two main groups, namely blacks, Africans, and Indians, East Indians. The NPS, the National Party Suriname, which initially was formed by intellectuals, usually light-skinned mixed people. Yes, we have colorism too. Later succeeded in incorporating the darker-skinned descendants of enslaved Africans, also the Maroons, the Indigenous, Chinese, and so on. And this was done under the leadership of Johann Adolf Pengel. The electoral system was arranged by districts, and the districts were structured by the ethnic groups living in such a district. So the game was played in such a way to obtain as much seats in a certain district as possible. It's not strange that the aforementioned developments took place in this time frame. The Second World War had ended some years prior, and Suriname had played a major role in providing bauxite for the aluminum industry, which had to provide for the construction of fighter planes. Suriname's economy transformed from a plantation economy to a mining economy. Another main issue which was prevalent at that time, the first political parties were founded, was independence. In 1942, Queen Wilhelmina announced in a radio speech that in the new constitutional structure for the Kingdom of the Netherlands, Indonesia, Suriname, and the Netherlands Antilles would obtain autonomy within the government association. This message was actually more directed towards Indonesia, but the other parts of the kingdom held the Dutch to this promise. So after the war, the preparation towards this new structure were made. The promised form of autonomy was proclaimed in 1954, and it was called Het Statuut. It entailed autonomy for the Surinamese government within the kingdom. So all internal affairs would be done by the Surinamese government, no foreign policy, and Suriname also didn't have an army. The desire for independence was livelier amongst the Creole intellectuals. It was also the spirit of the times which influenced the people. Guyana, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, and Jamaica were independent from the 16th and 17th on. In Africa, a lot of countries obtained independence either through warfare or through negotiations, and we didn't want to be left behind. And also, the Netherlands didn't want to be, again, the latest. The Partij van de Arbeid, the main labor party in the Netherlands at that time, a progressive party who came to power in 1973, wanted to do its contribution in correcting this issue. From 1949 on, the elections were about dividing the power cake between the ethnic groups in Suriname. The NPS and the VHP usually obtained most of the seats, and the leaders Johann Adolf Pengel and Jagannath Lachman agreed to a politics of fraternization. This fraternization resulted in years-long collaboration between these two parties. And this is in contrast to what was happening in Guyana, where the two main ethnic groups of blacks and East Indians got into a conflict with violent eruptions, especially after the 1964 elections in Guyana. The collaboration of the NPS and the VHP ensured political peace. But the fraternization came to an end in the late 60s. From the time of the statute on, serious talks and negotiations were held with the Dutch. At a certain point, Pengel died, and his successor, Henk Aron, embraced the idea of working towards independence. He chose to work with the more radical Revolutionary Party, PNR, whose main theme was obtaining independence. And he also included some other partners, the Catholic Party, PSV, and the Japanese Party, KTPI. And this means that the VHP was left out of this coalition. The coalition was called Nationale Partij Combinatie, NPK. From the point of view of the NPK, the VHP was deliberately slowing down the process towards independence. Lachman wanted more time, he wanted a referendum, and so on. It's argued that he was afraid that with the withdrawal of the Dutch, the Creoles would obtain all the power and drive the Hindustani to the background, or even worse, get into situations similar to Guyana. The government in Holland, with Prime Minister Joop den Uyl, didn't want to wait and gave that signal to Suriname. Aron didn't want the humiliation of being thrown out of the kingdom, so he surprised friend and foe in February 1975 that not later than ultimo 1975, Suriname had to be independent. Both sides of the ocean worked towards this goal, and on the 25th of November 1975, Suriname became independent. Aron managed to get a deal of 3.5 billion Dutch guilders for development aid, which would be about 1.8 billion US dollar, which is a large amount for a country as small as Suriname. It took till this year, 2025, to allocate and spend the last part of this money. There are some dramatic moments which took place in the months leading up to November 1975. The seating in the parliament in 1975 was 22 coalition NPK seats and 17 opposition seats, mostly of the VHP, the opposition. In the middle of 1975, 3 members of the NPK coalition decided to leave the coalition, which brought the situation to 19 NPK coalition seats. This meant that a quorum to have a meeting in parliament could not be obtained without one of these 3 dissidents or without a member of the opposition. And a quorum was needed to pass the Constitution, legislation with regards to the Constitution. During this period, a lot of people got scared, also because of the negative propaganda. There were a lot of concerns about safety, about secureness, and so on. There were fires, a lot of fires, which were clearly set, fires on official buildings. The ethnic polarization reached a dangerous point. And a lot of people left Suriname in 1975 and also in 1974. As you see in the chart, on a population of about 380,000 people, almost 40,000 left in 1975. And a year earlier, in 1974, the number was nearly 18,000. Most of them went to Holland, to Amsterdam, Rotterdam, The Hague. They just up and left without planning, and they were scared. They were scared to stay. The quorum problem sustained. In the meantime, exponents of the NPS and presumably one or more Dutch politicians persuaded one of the VHP members to help with the quorum issue. George Hindery, who was supposed to be the successor of Lachman, the leader of the VHP, helped. It was a slap in the face for Lachman and the VHP. Hindari allegedly didn't want to be on the side of postponing such an important step for Suriname. After this step, Aaron made a gesture towards Lachman on the 18th of November, so a week before the 25th, and the gesture was accepted. And the next day, on the 19th of November, the Constitution was approved unanimously, and Lachman and Aaron embraced each other. And a side note, even though tension was high and many people were leaving the country, there were also people who were very optimistic about the upcoming day of the 25th and were organizing festivities. One of these was the formation of the new flag on the Orange Square, which was to be called Independence Square from now on. Children from different schools were participating. None of the Hindustani schools were in the preparations. By the time Lachman and Aaron embraced each other, these schools were added to the flag forming. It asked for some rearranging, but the organization did it because of the important signal which would be given by including these schools. And I'm proud to say that my father, Vries-VanderKooy, as Minister of Education, was the main organizer of this event. So, now Suriname was independent. Depending on who you ask, whether it was the right decision, whether it was the right decision at that time, you'll get a different answer. As I already said, as offspring from advocates of the independence, I say it was the right decision. Postponing was no longer an option. For every major step, you can find a million excuses to not take the step. Also, depending on who you ask, the answer on the question, if things were going in the right direction, you'll either hear, yes, but of course with challenges and some startup problems. And others will say that there was a lot of corruption and that needed to be stopped. This reason is used to this day for the coup d'etat, which took place only 5 years into our independence. With elections in sight, in March of 1980, the coup took place in February 1980. 16 sergeants, under the leadership of Daisy Bouterse, grabbed power. There are rumors that the military had been instigated by the Dutch government. We don't know for sure, but fact is that the official files with documents regarding this issue are locked up for 60 years by the Dutch government. And this means that by the time they become public, all the important actors will be dead. The coup is a turning point for Suriname. Suriname experienced the negative consequences of such an intervention. Democracy put on the side, constitution on hold, people being locked up without a proper trial, neighbors, friends, and family members betraying each other. And the most devastating of all was the elimination of 15 intellectuals on December 8, 1982. These men, lawyers, journalists, professors, were protesting, not necessarily together. They were protesting against the fact that promises were not kept, that prisoners didn't have a just trial, and foremost, that the promised elections were not organized. The coup of 1980 and the December murders of 1982 resulted in new waves of immigration, especially to Holland. For some, it was escaping Suriname in order to not be killed. The Dutch government stopped the development aid, and as the bauxite alumina sector was not doing well, Suriname got in a big economic crisis. This crisis entailed empty shelves in the supermarkets, lack of everything, toilet paper, sugar, cooking oil, name it. Being stuck, the military leaders started talks with the political parties, especially the NPS, the VHP, and the KTPI. The talks resulted in elections in 1987, which were won overwhelmingly by the old parties. The National Democratic Party, under rule of the former dictator, only got 3 seats. At the same time the talks to return to democracy were held, a rebel group started in 1986 with a guerrilla movement to overthrow the military regime. This group, called Jungle Commando, was under leadership of Ronnie Brunswijk. A 6-year-long armed conflict was the consequence. We call this in Suriname the Interior War, Binnenlandse Oorlog. Brunswijk is presumed to have been supported by the Dutch and the French. Especially Maroon people fled to French Guyana. They also fled to the capital, Paramaribo, and surrounding areas. Schools, villages, health centers were all destroyed. The most devastating incident during this war was the raiding of the village Moywana in 1986. 39 people, mostly women and children, were killed by a military unit as they believed that the villagers were hiding Brunswijk. In 2005, Suriname was convicted for this massacre and has paid reparation fees, and formal apologies were offered. The prosecution and punishment of those responsible and the restitution of traditional land has still to be effected. I'm not going into detail here, not because it's not important, but that issue is a whole talk in itself. At some point, peace talks started when the new democratically chosen government was in place. It took several years and several attempts, but in 1992, the peace treaty was signed between the Jungle Commando and the Surinamese government. The first democratic government after the coup was abruptly put to an end by what we call the telephone coup or the Christmas coup. The military called the president to step down on Christmas Eve in 1990. The next election was in 1991, and the old parties, joined by a Labour Party, won the elections again, but with less seats. The government from 1992 on, led by my father, Ronald Venetiaan, had to execute a structural adjustment program. The development aid, which was paused by the Dutch in 1982, was not made available promptly. It took many discussions, negotiations to get the money flowing. The structural adjustment program was very harsh on the people. Inflation, devaluation of our currency against the US dollar, and we are an import country, brain drain. Again, we had a migration flow out of Suriname. During the elections which followed in 1996, the old parties were somewhat punished for the structural adjustment program. And the NDP, the party of the former dictator, got enough seats to persuade members of parliament to their side. This is what we call the capital coup. I can explain later during the question section what do we mean by that. But the end result was that the NDP got in power with dissidents from the VHP, the KTPI, and some other parties. In 2000, the old parties came back. In 2005, Venetiaan included the Maroon parties in the coalition. In 2010, the NDP again got into power and formed a coalition with Ronnie Brunswick, former leader of the Jungle Commando. So the two leaders of the interior war now were together in power. One of the peculiarities of my country. In 2020, the VHP won the election with big numbers under the leadership of Chandrika Persad Santokhi and formed a coalition with, among others, Ronnie Brunswick, and Ronnie Brunswick became vice president of the country. This year, we had elections. Is het uit? Let even uit.
I don't know why it's stopped.
Okay. Yeah. This year we've had elections and we now have the first female president, and she is from the NDP. Her name is Jennifer Simons, and the NDP is the post-military party, and they are now working with the NPS, which actually was a victim of the 1980 coup. So the pattern that we see in Suriname is an up and down cycle with regards to who's in power, with regards to the economy, inflation, exchange rate to the US dollar, brain drain, and so on. The populist NDP party usually finishes up all the money. And then the older parties have to repair with unpopular policies which affect the poorest people. Presently, we have just finished an IMF adjustment program which have impoverished many people. The coup and especially the December murders have divided Suriname into two camps. On the one hand, the supporters of Desi Bouterse, leader of the military coup. On the other hand, supporters of the old political parties and the relatives of the men murdered in December 1982. In 2007, the criminal trial against the main suspect, Desi Bouterse, and others started. The trial took many years, with a conviction in 2019. At that time, Bouterse was president of the country. Another peculiarity. He appealed, and finally in 2023, the conviction was affirmed. Then Bouterse disappeared. And last Christmas Eve, so in 2024, we heard that he had died. His body was brought to Paramaribo, the capital, where he was cremated. What is the role of the Anton de Kom University of Suriname in all this? The founding of the university may be seen as linked to the desire to independence. In 1966, when the predecessor of the parliament, the Staten, became 100 years old, the government gave a present to the nation in the form of establishing the University of Suriname. The university started with the law school in 1968, and gradually more faculties were added. The December murders of 1982 also impacted the university. At the university, students joined in the protests against the military, demanding elections. Quite a lot of the student leaders were arrested and put in jail. The Union of Scientific Personnel also joined in the protests with strikes and demonstrations. And 2 of the professors of the university were between the 15 men that were killed. After a December 1982, schools were closed. Also, the university was closed. Everybody was scared. It's one of the darkest periods in Suriname. Intellectual thinking had been given a heavy blow. In 1983, the university was opened again by the dictator. The name changed to Anton de Kom University of Suriname, and the structure also changed. Anton de Kom was an activist in the 30s of the 20th century, especially with regards to workers' rights. He was banned from Suriname to the Netherlands. He joined the resistance during the Second World War in the Netherlands and was imprisoned in a German concentration camp where he died. The ups and downs impacting society also impact the university. This means that the university is almost continuously in need of funding. We use creative methods to keep running and to even innovate where possible. What does the future have in store for Suriname? Even though there's a lot of talk of diversification of our economy, our main sector is still mining. There's a lot of talk about agriculture, but we have trouble finding field workers. There's a lot of talk about tourism, but that has to be developed. Some people say, earn money with carbon credits. We are one of the 3 countries in the world which are carbon negative. But the regulations with regards to carbon credits are not for countries who have maintained their pristine forests. So carbon credits would not be the answer. The numbers show that Suriname to this point relies predominantly on gold and oil. The country is now in expectation of many good developments from the oil and gas sector, which will bring us wealth, is the promise from 2028 on. This is because of the discovery of proven offshore oil reserves, and for one of the blocks, the company Total Energies has already made a final decision to exploit this area. Our neighbor Guyana has been ahead of us and has now realized economic growth of 40% and more for the last years. Probably the fastest growing economy at this point. Suriname wants to follow. It will be a very good opportunity. We are enthusiastic and optimistic, and we are aware that we must be careful to not fall in the resources curse or the Dutch disease. It's up to us to manage the revenues in such a way that the majority of the Surinamese people will profit. We have to make sure that no one is left behind. It's a challenge, but I think we can do it. Suriname will continue to strive to respect the various ethnic groups while ensuring they are given full opportunities to participate at all levels of society. There are some challenges that must be overcome, such as access to good education and good health care for everyone, land rights for the indigenous and the Maroons, And furthermore, we have to find the formula to keep the young people in which we have invested through education and healthcare in our country. We have to break the cycle of up and down economy as a consequence of our own actions. We are now at the forefront of what our state oil company calls a grand morgue, a new dawn with a promising horizon. Coming to that point will ask some years of disciplined governmental behavior. The current government is led by the populist party NDP, but they have promised to be very careful this time. We'll see. I'm not a pessimist, and I don't want to live anywhere else, so I'll continue to give my time and energy to my country. And I thank you for your attention. Thank you very much.
So thank you, everybody, and we have time for Q&A at this point. Oh, I believe, is this one the new one?
Yes,
Oh, that's working. So I will walk this around. If you can please say your name if you ask a question, and then Dr. Venetiaan will answer.
Thank you very much. That was so very interesting. You're part of the world that we don't ever learn anything about in this country. With the closing idea of the oil resources being used as a source of development for the country, how do you feel about that in a world where that may or may not be a good idea to continue with fossil fuels? And I also wanted to know you're so close to the equator, right? How is climate change affecting Suriname?
Yeah. So, you're right. It's not, how do you say it, popular now, also within mind climate change and the use of fossil fuels. But we need, how do you say it? We need the funds. At this point, our economy is not doing well, and it's not clear from what other sides the funds would be coming to get to a better economy. And also the idea is to diversify with the revenues of the oil and gas sector. And climate change is affecting us, as I showed you in the map of South America. Our coastline is rather low, and we already have that the coastline is, the water is coming, so to speak. So there are certain areas already affected by seawater coming in. So people, I think some people would have to move within a few decades if we don't build a dam. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for your talk, Dr. Venetiaan. My name is Staaf de Jong. I'm a Dutch journalist here at a fellowship at the Naipaul Center for Journalists. You mentioned in your talk how the country was kind of split between one part to have supported Desi Bouters and the other half the established your own political parties.
Yeah.
But what do you think the appeal was of Desi Bouters to a big segment of the population?
He had a lot of charisma. He could, how do you say it? He could talk on the level of de gewone man. Hoe zeg je dat in het Engels?
The
The regular person.
The regular person. So, um, yeah, so people were not necessarily interested in really the policies that someone was talking about, but in how does the politician makes me feel. Is he listening to me? What is he saying? And he was saying the right things. And as in many countries, I think there is a rivalry between intellectuals and people who with less schooling, and they always have the idea that they are looked down, that people look down upon them, and he was not like that. He himself didn't have so much schooling, and he, yeah, the way he talked, the way he behaved, and so on. Yeah, people like that very much. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to thank everyone, thank you as echoing everyone else, and bringing this wonderful education to us about the history of Suriname. I'm also interested in your personal story. It sounds like you have broken so many barriers and laid some new trails for yourself in your career. I would love to hear a bit more about that.
Yes. Well, yes, there are barriers, but they are not seen as me really by barriers. I mean, if you're the only one, it's not so difficult to get to certain positions, and in Suriname, women have been working for decades. It's very normal that women work outside of the house, and my mother also worked, so it's normal, and that women are going to do their studies and go to university. In fact, now at the university we have more women studying. I think it's 2/3 women, yes. And even the engineering programs, I think it's now 50-50, whereas decades earlier there would really be more males at the engineering programs. Some people say it has to do with the economy, that boys are more, how do you say it? They want to go to work, and that the parents give the girls the opportunity to study, but they expect from the boys that they should contribute to the household. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Thank you so much for coming and for giving such a wonderful overview of Suriname. I have a two-part question, and it's about the demographics. I'm very interested in, from the 2012 census, there seems to be some disappearance of groups. You mentioned about indigenous, for example, populations.
Well, So what's happened at the 2012 census is that some people wanted, for instance, let's say the Africans. Usually we just said Creole, as I said. Now people wanted Afro-Surinamer. Some people wanted Afro-Surinamer. Some still wanted Creole. So, and people have to self-report. So when the person comes to your home to ask the questions, they present you with some options, and then you choose. And the Maroons also want to be seen, because Maroons are actually also from African descendants, but they want their identity to be noticed. So that's why it's changed. It's changed through the years many times. And the indigenous, maybe it's because just for the charter, because the indigenous group in Suriname is small, rather small, I think about 5%. So they are in order now, I think. But that doesn't mean that the census reports doesn't have the number for the indigenous. But for the chart, probably I've done it like this. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that's very interesting to know that people self-identify and it's not something that's imposed.
No.
The categories are
No.
based on what people feel about themselves.
Yes.
And my second part of this, because I'm a linguist, I'm very interested if language plays a part again in these mixes in terms of dominant languages of Suriname. Your English is beautiful, of course, but what about other languages, maybe more traditional languages in Suriname Tongo, for example? How do languages play in terms of this census and education policy?
So Dutch is the official language. So in schools and so on, we talk Dutch. And an aunt of mine, she was a teacher, she said, the children are only speaking Dutch in the classroom, but outside on the schoolyard, they would be speaking at her school, Suriname Tongo. So Dutch was a language which, how do you say it? People were using the way they were speaking Dutch to show that they were of a certain class or of a certain, that they had a certain education. So, for instance, when I was growing up, some groups would make fun of other groups who were not so good with Dutch, but that has now faded away. Even, I don't know if you do Dutch, you have the articles hier dan, lidwoorden, the de and het. And some groups, some ethnic groups, they have a lot of trouble with using the right article before a noun, zelfstandig naamwoord? Yeah, before a noun. And in the time my parents were growing up, actually everybody was talking the lingua franca, Suriname Tongo, but still parents were telling their children, speak Dutch, praat Hollands. And they were, how do you say it, stimulated or maybe forced to talk Dutch. But that has now faded a bit. What we have is that the ethnic groups, especially the Hindustani, view the Suriname Tongo as a language of the Creoles, which is not really the case, but the Creoles were there before they came, so the language was already there. And that's why they insist in some circumstances. For instance, the national anthem. When I was growing up, we usually only sang the second verse, the Opokondre Mang. But now the Hindustani have, what do you say it? They insist that we sing both verses. And yeah, the people are flexible, so we sing both verses. So the first verse is in Dutch. The Maroons, because they were isolated, they have their own languages, and at home, the people would be talking their own language. The same is true for the Hindustani. The Javanese, there is a chance that their language might get lost. Yeah, there are fewer and fewer people talking the languages, the Javanese language. So there are some intellectuals, some linguists who are trying to get the young people to learn the language. But yeah, so in the streets, in the markets, you would hear Suriname Tongo. most of the time, and almost everyone speaks that language. Yeah. Mm.
Thank you. I'm just curious. I'm an engineering student here at the U of M. Why did you decide to earn a math degree?
Me. Simple. I liked math. It was, and my father is also a mathematician, so I think I have the genes for it, and I liked it. So that's why I did math. Mm. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Venetiaan. My name is Casey.
Mm-hmm.
I've had the pleasure to live in Suriname for 2 years and also went back to visit about 2.5 years ago. And one of the topics I noticed and overheard sort of anecdotally was at the time the country was having trouble attracting and retaining professionals in the medical field in particular.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just wondering currently how you feel the country is doing with attracting and retaining professionals, be it in the medical field or perhaps in the sciences or the university, and how you feel like the country is doing now, and is the trajectory going forward in that area.
Yes. I think it's the same as what you experienced. So a lot of people are leaving. When the economy goes down, people leave. With regards to the medical field, we have a medical school. We have a limited enrollment. And in the 70s, in the 60s, young doctors were obliged to work in the interior for a year or maybe 2 years. But as the interior war happened, that stopped. So we have a lack of people who are willing to work in the interior as a doctor. So that's a problem. Nurses are leaving. As the economy goes down, we have a lot of nurses leaving, educators, engineers, and so on. So people, they say they love Suriname, but they love their their purse more, of course. So if the economy is not going well, they leave, and we've had a new wave of brain drain the last 5 years. Mm. Yeah.
Maybe you have an opportunity for one more question.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Charlie. Thank you for your lecture.
Mm-hmm.
I was curious about currently the extent of the relationship between the Netherlands and Suriname, and how the people of Suriname view the Netherlands as a former colonizing power.
Yeah.
And if in any official capacity there's still a relationship there.
Sorry, the last part?
I was curious if there's still, in any official capacity, a relationship between the Netherlands and Suriname.
Yeah. There's always been an official relationship. There have been, so to speak, cold periods, especially when Desi Bouterse was in power. I didn't mention it in my talk, but we also had a narco, so to speak, episode in Suriname, which started when Bouterse was in power. So a drug trafficking problem. Suriname is used as a hub. And so Desi Bouterse was convicted by a trial which was held in Holland. So when he was in power, the relationship was a bit cold, but officially it was always there. And yeah, so From people to people, so individuals, the relationship can be very good. There's a lot of people from Suriname living in the Netherlands, so there is a lot of traffic because people come to visit their family, or Surinamese people go there to visit their family. Young people go to the Netherlands to study and things like that. So that is ongoing.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
If I can have a round of applause.